In the 1980s, this wasn't just a board game in the basement. It was accused of leading kids into Satanism, possibly even murder. Preachers called it a gateway to hell. News anchors warned parents to be afraid. But today, Dungeons & Dragons is streamed to millions online, embraced by celebrities, and can be found in many popular television shows, movies, and video games. So how did a so-called dangerous cult game survive the panic and transform into a pop culture phenomenon? By the early 1980s, America was in the grip of what would later be called the Satanic Panic. Daycare centers, heavy metal, even cartoons were accused of hiding occult messages. So when a new game called Dungeons & Dragons spread among teens, it became an easy target. In 1979, a gifted student named James Dallas Egbert III vanished from his dorm at Michigan State. Investigators speculated he'd become lost in underground steam tunnels while playing D&D. The press ran with the story. College kid disappears after fantasy game. The implication was clear. But the truth was more complicated. Egbert struggled with depression and pressure, and his death had nothing to do with dice or dragons. Still, the rumor stuck. Then came Hollywood. In 1982, a made-for-TV movie called Mazes and Monsters, starring a young Tom Hanks, showed a gamer who couldn't tell fantasy from reality.
Battles, maiming, killing.
Hey, it's all imagination.
Is it?
And in 1983, after the tragic death of her son, activist Patricia Pulling founded Bothered About Dungeons & Dragons, or BAD. She claimed the game was linked to violence, witchcraft, even demon summoning. Pulling went further, filing lawsuits against schools, guidance counselors, and even TSR, the game's publisher. She argued that D&D functioned as a death cult in disguise. None of her cases succeeded, but the headlines made her a national figure.
Start doing some serious research and start stopping children from dying over something that they didn't have to die.
Television talk shows and televangelists amplified her warnings. By the mid-80s, stories about D&D leading kids to crime or cults were everywhere. As one preacher put it, it's not just a game, it's a gateway to hell. For millions of Americans, that was the only version of Dungeons & Dragons they had ever heard.
There's a book called None Dare Call It Witchcraft, who said it's the most cleverly packaged presentation to the occult ever made.
So what exactly is Dungeons & Dragons? At its core, it isn't a board game or a video game. It's collaborative storytelling. A group of players invent characters, barbarians, rogues, wizards, and describe what they want to do. The Dungeon Master sets the scene, playing every monster, villager, or dragon they encounter. The dice decides what happens. Does your sword strike true? Does your spell misfire? Every roll can change the story. Created in 1974 by Gary Gygax and Dave Arneson,
you'll recognize Gary Gygax, inventor of Dungeons & Dragons.
Greetings! It's a pleasure to meet you.
The first edition of D&D was a strange hybrid. It borrowed rules from war games, measuring distance, calculating odds, but turned them into personal adventures. Instead of armies, you played a single character. The inspiration was clear. Gygax and Arneson drew heavily from Tolkien's Lord of the Rings, Robert E. Howard's Conan the Barbarian, Michael Moorcock's Elric novels, and countless myths and fairy tales. D&D was a way to step into those worlds instead of just reading about them. The rulebooks looked arcane, filled with tables and spells, but that was the point. It was a toolkit for imagination. To outsiders, this looked suspicious. Lists of demons and monsters, players talking about casting spells, wandering through dungeons. If you didn't know it was fiction, you could easily mistake it for something darker. But the truth is, Dungeons & Dragons was never about summoning evil. It was, and still is, about telling stories with friends, creating worlds together, and escaping into adventure. Which raises the question, if that's all it was, why did the stigma stick for so long?
Let's try something else. Maybe we should...
Put the dice away before I take them away.
The moral panic eventually faded, but the reputation stuck. By the 1990s, Dungeons & Dragons wasn't seen as dangerous anymore. It was seen as nerdy, a game for outcasts mocked on playgrounds and late-night TV. The phrase basement dweller became shorthand for D&D fans. And yet, the game endured. Its players formed tight-knit communities, swapping stories at conventions and devouring tie-in novels like Dragonlance and Forgotten Realms, which sold millions of copies worldwide. A Saturday morning D&D cartoon even aired in the 80s, introducing kids to the fantasy worlds their parents feared. Meanwhile, its influence spread far beyond the table. Early role-playing video games like Warcraft, Dragon Age, and even tabletop rivals like Warhammer all borrowed heavily from D&D's mechanics and settings. Even if you'd never rolled a D20, you were probably playing something inspired by it. But behind the scenes, the company that created D&D, TSR, was collapsing under financial troubles and mismanagement. By 1997, it was on the verge of disappearing completely. Then came Wizards of the Coast, the publishers of Magic the Gathering. They bought D&D, stabilized the brand, and pushed it into a new era with the launch of the 3rd edition in 2000. And the timing couldn't have been better. Fantasy itself was going mainstream. Harry Potter was on every bookshelf. The Lord of the Rings filled movie theaters, and millions logged into online worlds like World of Warcraft.
Alright, thumbs up. Ready, guys? Let's do this. Leroy Dragons! Oh my god, he just ran in.
Suddenly, the fantasy genre wasn't just for nerds, and slowly the stigma around D&D began to shift. The game hadn't vanished, but it was still waiting for its true comeback.
You are not prepared.
The real comeback for Dungeons & Dragons didn't happen in game stores or convention halls. It happened online. By the 2010s, a new phenomenon was emerging: actual play shows. Groups of friends recording their campaigns live-streamed for others to watch. One of the earliest breakout hits was Dimension 20, hosted by comedian Brennan Lee Mulligan, which blended sharp improv with cinematic storytelling. But the show that initially changed everything was Critical Role. In 2015, a group of professional voice actors, DM'd by Matthew Mercer, began streaming their weekly home game on Felicia Day's production company and YouTube channel, Geek and Sundry, before splitting off onto their own stream. What started as friends playing D&D quickly became a global sensation. Episodes ran for hours, yet drew millions of viewers. Fans watched for the characters, the emotions, the drama, like a fantasy TV series where the script was being written in real time. The show's popularity proved that D&D wasn't just a game, it was entertainment. It could make you laugh, cry, and cheer just like your favorite series. And Critical Role didn't just grow big, it grew massive. The cast built one of the most successful Kickstarter campaigns in history, launched an animated series on Amazon Prime, and turned their campaign into best-selling books and comics. Other shows followed suit, but none matched its influence. For an entire generation, Critical Role was D&D. And celebrities soon joined the fun. Stephen Colbert, Vin Diesel, Joe Manganiello, Deborah Ann Woll. Names that once would have never admitted to rolling dice now played on camera proudly. Suddenly, Dungeons & Dragons wasn't just surviving, it was thriving in the spotlight. Dungeons & Dragons didn't just rise online, it broke into mainstream pop culture. In 2016, the hit Netflix series Stranger Things opened with kids battling a Demogorgon around the D&D table. For millions of viewers, this was their first real look at the game, and it reframed D&D as something nostalgic and heroic. Even sitcoms embraced it. The cult favorite show Community aired two-parter episodes centered on D&D, both of which became fan favorites. Hollywood had tried before. In 2000, a live-action Dungeons & Dragons movie hit theaters, and flopped hard. Critics panned it as campy, confusing, and missing the spirit of the game entirely. But in 2023, everything changed. Dungeons & Dragons Honor Among Thieves brought the heart of the game to the big screen. The film wasn't a parody or a cautionary tale. It was a love letter to the humor, teamwork, and imagination that make the game beloved.
You got her!
That same year, the video game Baldur's Gate 3, built directly on D&D's 5th edition rules, became one of the most acclaimed RPGs of the decade, sweeping Game of the Year awards and drawing millions of new fans into the worlds of Dungeons & Dragons. Suddenly, the same hobby once mocked as nerds in a basement was being celebrated on Netflix, in theaters, and across the gaming industry. Dungeons & Dragons had finally completed its transformation, from outsider curiosity to pop culture icon. Today, Dungeons & Dragons is more than just entertainment, it's a tool. Therapists use the game to help patients build confidence, communication, and empathy. Psychologist Dr. Rafael Bocamazzo, for example, pioneered therapeutic D&D to support children on the autism spectrum. In schools, D&D clubs have exploded in popularity. Teachers use it to spark creativity, teamwork, and problem-solving, skills students can carry on into real life. Some programs even weave it into history or literature classes, letting kids experience the stories instead of just reading them. And it isn't just kids. Some corporations even use role-playing exercises inspired by D&D for leadership training and team building. The same mechanics once accused of warping young minds are now used to strengthen workplaces. The irony is impossible to miss. In the 1980s, critics warned that roleplay and fantasy would harm children. Today, those very traits are celebrated as tools for education, therapy, and personal growth. The so-called gateway to hell has become a gateway to creativity, empathy, and community. In the end, all it needed was the right party to tell its story. Thank you for watching. Subscribe for more, and as always, stay curious.